Can the lithium rally continue? We're looking at the strength and resilience of this theme and understanding how to trade the best lithium exposed companies on the ASX today. We're going to use a range of proprietary indicators, and that's to understand how the lithium share prices move, and one may lead another and another and another. So we can see a huge amount of time to enter these positions before the first indication. GL1 is the chart on the right-hand side. That's going to be a great example of these launchpad companies that we're going to delve into, because that pattern resembles somewhat of the lithium futures. And then all these markings here on the left-hand side now going full screen are the breakouts that we're going to talk about in this pattern. So we'll bring this into the top 10 companies that we've looked at on the lithium side of things. These are ranked from Launchpad. Now, Launchpad is something that we surface each week in the 30/30 list and discuss the leading ones on the ASX. We've narrowed that list down to the Launchpad performances or output between October and April. And GT1 is ranked number 1, is coming out as the most frequently Launchpad or best ranking Launchpad company over the period. We normally go top 10, but there are fewer liquids and IPOs in here, so we've got 13. We will use GL1 as an example to describe the Launchpad because it's a perfect example. Think of the Launchpad as the rocket. The rocket's rolling out, needs to be rolled out, but it needs a level launch pad. And that's what this base has been built here with GL1. As we scroll to the right, you're going to see where the rocket breaks out or the share price rises, as it has done. Then it creates another base. Think of it as steps, moving up a platform, building that platform, that base, before it breaks out again and rallies. Moving on again for the next step, it's building another launch pad, another base on a higher step, rallies, and then rallies and rallies to where it is on another base. And that's throughout February. And then finally it rallies once again. You can see why we're talking about launch pads, because this basing pattern here, this volatility compression, is critical and key before buying these shares before they break out $1.50 up towards $2.70. You also want to know, before that rally, you want to see this compression. This is the base, this is the launch pad. Now, those of you who follow and have seen the videos or know trading patterns well will be familiar with a lot of the terminology that we're using. We're talking about Mark Minervini's volatility contraction pattern, and we're going to reference that a lot. You can click on the link in the description below to learn more about it, or on screen. We've got downloads, we've got detailed tutorials. We've also looked at lithium as well in the May breakout of 2021 and pulled apart 12 VCPs on that space. So you can click on to understand that. We're also using the high and tight flag pattern. Now let's use a good example, which is MRR, to talk about the high and tight flag. Not as well known as the volatility contraction pattern, but when you see 100%, there's a good base here. That's a launch pad that we're talking about throughout this period. And then when you see 100% rise, we'll get that on screen. So we're going from 2 cents to 5 cents for MRR. That's more than 100% rise. If you can congest in the top half of that rally, so if we cut this rally in half, there's the low, there's the high, cut it in half. If you stay in the top half, preferably the top third, that creates a high and tight flag and the opportunity to break out. Now we're seeing this compress along here. Think of that, well, it is a triangle, and then it breaks out with volume, breaks out with gusto. We see volume be the highest in 10, 15 days. That signals that a high and tight flag has broken out. So that's a critical, these are 2 really important strategies to understand when trading leading lithium or leading mining companies on the ASX, small and mid caps as well. So that's led to them rallying, breaking out, and really pushing up. So the launch pad is critical. When trading high and tight flags, we've found that to double the likelihood of hitting a profit target, so we'll see what MRR looks like, we'll drag that across. You want to get 100%, maybe from, so 2, you want to see at least another 2 or 3 cents from breakout. It goes from 4 up to 7 in a matter of days, it hits profit target. It's twice as likely to hit profit target in our research, or what we have found, if there is a strong theme behind this high and tight flag. It's one thing to build a high and tight flag by itself. If you do it in concert with other companies in a similar industry, that doubles the chances of it hitting profit target. So then that takes us into what we're doing here with the list and how to see whether it's a leading theme. Understanding a leading theme is where our proprietary indicators come in, and we're going to bring that on full screen so that you can see the screenshot or snippets of charts that we've used here. What we want to know is whether it's a strong thematic. Let's go for the top 10. That's what we've got on the screen here. From a weekly perspective, we saw that lithium shares moved into the top 10 of the ASX from a theme or industry perspective. The same time as oil and gas, vanadium, copper, uranium, weaponry, as well as cybersecurity. There's no coincidence that all of those industries were impacted heavily when Russia invaded Ukraine and more news was flowing out. So from the 28th of February through to the 1st of March, there was a rapid increase, and you can see that on the far right-hand side with that rallying up and moving. A lot of these moved into those top positions. So we know that lithium's a strong theme, but we've known that for a while. We want to check that it's still ranking very well over the quarter. So the importance of the quarterly performance is to tell us that money is still being deployed there and it hasn't flushed out. We haven't had it tank over the last quarter, but there's still good support in it. Think of that as institutional support. So they can buy back towards the 50 or 200-day moving averages. When we see the pullbacks, they get accumulated. That helps build the launch pad so the two feed each other. But what we're looking at for the quarterly performance around the same time is we saw lithium coming there before that 1st of March spike. Around the 24th of February is when it came in with rare earth, lithium, coal, graphite, nickel, non-conventional energy. They were in there. So it tells us that there's still that underlying support for lithium companies. We've ticked those two boxes. There's a few others that we can cover, but the range is more of a momentum indicator. We're going to cover that a little bit later in a few others. So they're the proprietary indicators that help us tell where the top themes are, which then that feeds into our shares in play, the top 6 companies that we're servicing all the time. It might be lithium, it might be uranium, but we're using this proprietary research to identify the top themes on the ASX, whether it's week, month, or quarter. That depends on what's happening at the time. So they are the proprietary indicators. Now we move it back to have a look and talk about the timeline of this breakout. Understanding the timeline of the lithium breakout between March and April, it's really critical to understand what the futures were doing at the same time, because it's a commodity and that follows what's happening on the futures market. Here's the front month, so a continuous front month contract pricing side of things. We can see that the lithium commodity futures contract broke out with this blue triangle wedge. That's when they started to move upwards. It took about a week later for B&R to break out, the first on the ASX lithium companies to start running. And then another 10 days before AVZ and QXR started to break out of volatility contraction pattern, VCP, and the high and tight flag, HTF. They broke out. Then the next day we had a cluster. Now, clusters are important because they show there's a huge amount of support for the thematic. These yellowy oranges, we're seeing Lake, we're seeing LPI, Firefinch, Core, CXO, they break out. The next day we've got MLS breakout. Then the next day we've got PLL breakout with 1MC. So springs and reversals in there, we should say. Have a bit of a pause. The lithium, the futures price goes sideways, but still breaks out. We see SYA breakout, AGY breakout, volatility contraction patterns for both. Then we see another cluster, 4 days between the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th. We see a whole lot. We see volatility contraction patterns, high and tight flags. We see compression. So we see the launch pad without really any other pattern, but they're breaking out. Then we see a few others. That tells us there's a lot of time in between the lithium commodity, the futures contract moving, the shares moving, and then the rest of the segment moving. That really highlights the real importance of understanding the theme and the ranking between first to last breakout, what happens there. Now, we looked at this once before, well, a few times before, but in May 2021, we looked at 12 volatility contraction patterns that did a similar thing, moving from Liontown Resources being the first one to break out, all the way through to the late movers. So Liontown was in May. We still saw volatility contraction patterns breaking out in August. So that tells us how long these themes can go for and really sound trading opportunities. This is where we come to in what we're going to have a look at is the last proprietary indicator that we're going to do, which is, it shows the importance of the launchpad, because all of these companies ranked well on the launchpad before they broke out. They also, we knew that they were performing and ranking well as a theme. So the theme started performing well and their launchpad ranks were also increasing. Now we're going to have a look at the last proprietary indicator that we'll share with you today and have a look at our broader studies. So looking at these broader studies, yes, that's a Google search and showing the lithium stocks and lithium prices when people look at them and how that tracks and plots over time. What we're looking at here is the Launchpad. So these Launchpad videos come out on Friday and they surface across the ASX, the best 30, which is the 30-30 list. We've got 30 top momentum companies, that's too late, and the 30 Launchpad companies, those who have built phenomenal bases. When we're thinking about phenomenal bases, think of having huge institutional support. We'll come back to this chart in a second because we will use the GL1 chart as a good example to understand how and why volatility into these Launchpads is important. When you see this volatility contracting, that's one thing. It shows that the hot money's leaving and it's compressing. But when we stop seeing these lower wicks, that tells us that there's buyers in there accumulating anything that they're sort of soaking up the supply. We also see the supply deplete. That's happening at the same time. Mark Minervini volatility contraction pattern, many will be familiar with that concept. Here's where the Launchpad comes in. We've had the volatility contract, we've had the volume contract, we're having the lower wicks contract. And what we're seeing is if the lower wicks are contracting, the share price is not coming down as much, so the volatility is reducing. And then we start seeing volume. What's happening here is institutions can't hide their volume. They leave big footprints. When we see that combined with Mark Minervini's VCPs, that's when we know the Launchpad's really being built and it's poised to break out. This is what's happening here. You're seeing there's some footprints coming here. Bang, there's the first footprint. It's already a Launchpad company by this point here. That's when it breaks out. So that's what we're going to have a look at here because the momentum is this orange line here. We've used 43 weekly average. That's not how we monitor it, but it really works for the purposes of this picture to understand this chart here. The orange line, think of that as momentum of the lithium companies on the ASX. The blue line is the Launchpad. Now the Launchpad, we become interested in it when we see it start increasing. So we've got limit down -10 and limit up 10 so that we can see the finer points of these chart. When we're coming from a massive negative that we have in the blue line here, that coincides with BNR's breakout. BNR was the first one to break out, remember, on the ASX. That tells us that the Launchpad, we're interested. At the same time, the rest of the group, this is the blue line, the lithium group, their Launchpad rankings across the ASX are dramatically rising. That's the huge blue line on the rally, the ramp of it we can see, and it continues and continues until we get, so it's already broken out here and we're ranking really high on the ASX right now. Launchpad ranks are through the roof. This is what we're surfacing each week, but this is what we're monitoring every day here on our own indicators. This coincides with the 1st of March, which is when we saw Lake Resource and CXO breakout. By the time they've broken out, we've already known for weeks that Launchpad, lithium companies have a Launchpad movement happening here. By the time it breaks out and everyone sees that it's moving, that's where we see this orange line move. It's too late by then. Horses are already bolted. The best case risk reward trades have already left. We've had low risk, high reward. That's what's been built in this blue line movement. They are the Launchpad stocks. By the time it breaks out, we already want to be set and then selling into this kind of volume. That's the opportunity that we're looking at with Launchpad companies. So that's going to be the last one that we share with you today on the themes and proprietary indicators. We're consistently working through the themes, the Launchpad stocks, ranking the themes, and then listing them through shares in play, which is the top 6 that we look at. And then also the top 30-30 list, which is the Friday video of the 30 momentum companies, and then also the 30 high velocity companies. And the idea is to identify themes like this in the early side of things to get set before the base breakouts. You can like the video to support the channel, click subscribe for updates, comment below to let us know the filters that you use, and you can share the video if you found it useful.